My voice is still gone, but that's okay. I really wanted to get this video out. See, many people read right past the deeper revelation in the story where Jesus calms the storm. And for much of my Christian life, I missed it too. Until one day, while I was reading, I noticed what Jesus does before this and what he does after. See, have you ever noticed how this miracle connects to the next story where Jesus sends a legion of demons into a herd of pigs? I'll give you a hint. The demons are in a graveyard and Jesus is in the middle of the sea. See, there's a deeper message behind this miracle. And there are certain details you can't overlook if you want the deeper message underneath this. So in this video, we're going to walk through this passage and highlight 7 key ideas that very often get overlooked. And these details will help us understand what Jesus is really doing here. By the end of this, you'll see the spiritual truth for your own life. So let's dive in. Welcome to Above Reproach Ministries. I'm Jason Camacho. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 23, and we'll end in verse 27. I would highly recommend that you like this video and subscribe if this content blesses you. And please do leave a comment letting me know what stood out to you in this study. For those of you who can't wait, here's the summary. Jesus is demonstrating his authority and his power over chaos and disorder, whether that be natural or spiritual. So we're going to walk through these key ideas that help us understand what's really happening. And if you have not already, watch the rest of our Matthew study on YouTube. You can check that out. So it says, and when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And so I want this to really sink in. Here's the first observation. I want to make sure you guys can really see this. The first observation is this context of the calming of the storm, the context is actually discipleship. This comes right after a scribe comes up to Jesus and says, I'll follow you wherever you go. And then another man comes up to Jesus and says, I'll follow you once I bury my father. And so this trip across the raging sea into Gentile territory, it's going to follow a conversation about the cost of discipleship. And so the context of a storm being calmed and the disciples' fears being dealt with, the context at least is the cost of discipleship, which means as we follow Jesus, one of those costs is that we face unexpected turmoil and storms that you did not see coming and you did not necessarily sign up for. So what's interesting is the men who came up to Jesus earlier, they're not said to be following Jesus across the sea in the boat. Only the disciples end up getting into the boat and trust Jesus' guidance. But they're about to unknowingly follow Jesus right into what looks and feels like a death sentence. Even though they're master fishermen and they know these waters well, they're going to be in very familiar yet unfamiliar territory. They've been here on the waters, but not in this kind of storm or in this position where they're able to do nothing except look to Jesus, their Jewish rabbi, and trust his guidance. This is going to be a stretch for them. So, behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he, Jesus, was asleep. The second observation is this is an obvious allusion to the Noah story. Now, we know that the disciples will make it to the other side with Jesus, spoiler alert, because they're in his boat. In other words, it's because of Jesus' presence that they make it safely through the storm. It's because they're connected to him. And this is very reminiscent of the Noah story. Noah climbs into the ark and his family follows him in faith. 7 days before the waters of the flood crash onto the land, and they make it safely through the floodwaters because they're attached to Noah. It's Noah's faithfulness in building the ark, in getting them in there, in taking God at his word. It's Noah's faithfulness that brings them through. It's because of who they're with. And over, the story in Genesis tells us those who were with Noah or with him. So there's also going to be an allusion to the Jonah story. That's the third observation, especially when we see suddenly a great storm arose on the sea, and the boat's being swamped by waves, filling the boat. And guess who's sleeping? The chosen and sent prophet of God. Not that Jesus is only a prophet, but this is an obvious link to the story of Jonah, who spends 3 nights and 3 days in the great fish after being chased down by God for going away from his mission. And this is how his time on the boat opens up. It says he's asleep A storm picks up, things start intensifying real fast. And I mentioned this earlier, how there are other connections to Jonah. I think I did at least. But there are other connections that we don't have time for right now. And I'm thinking of doing a video just drawing out the parallels between this small story and the Jonah story. So if you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments, because Jonah is mentioned 5 times in Matthew's gospel. So his ministry is important if we want to understand Jesus' mission, who he is, and what his ministry is really accomplishing. So what's interesting is that God allows this storm to get this bad. He let it get, watch how bad it gets. And they went and woke him. The boat's being swamped by the waves. They're freaking out. They say, "Save us, we are perishing." And God allows the storm to get to this point. And the disciples reach the point where they accept they're dying. And they've reached absolute desperation. So the question becomes, how long did it take for them to reach that point? We're not really sure how long they'd been struggling through this before they woke up Jesus, but Mark's account tells us that the boat is filling up, so that there's many factors to consider. But it could have been instantaneous. It could have been a bit of time where they struggled in their own strength. But essentially, they've already decided, we are dead. We are perishing. And then Jesus answers them in such a wonderful way. But I want us to focus in on this. We're perishing. Save us. We've already seen a few desperate figures come up to Jesus in chapter 8. The centurion, the leper, the crowds. And they believe they're in the process of dying here. And Jesus is their last resort. They've already decided what's happening, but what exactly did they think Jesus could do to slow this or stop it? What did they expect from him? Jesus answers. He said to them, "Why are you afraid?" Almost like, let's have a moment to assess how we've gotten to this point. What's the reason for your little faith and your fear? And I love that. Here's the 4th observation. Jesus addresses the real issue. The greatest problem is not the storm. Jesus speaks to them, "You of little faith," before he speaks to the storm. And he rebukes the fear and unbelief before rebuking the storm itself. It was more important and long-term valuable to deal with their hearts before he deals with the thing that was scaring them and threatening their lives. And Jesus seems to demonstrate what is found all across the pages of Scripture. God is more interested in our trust than in our convenience, our ease, and our temporary worldly comfort. Jesus does not relieve the pressure and lift the burden and stop the storm and fix the problem first. He uses the setting of the storm as a backdrop to deliver deeper truth. It's a teaching moment for the disciples. The storm provides the backdrop for a divine lesson. So here's the 5th observation. He says, "Then he rose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm." But first, why are we freaking out, boys? Why are we having little faith? This is a teaching moment on faith. We saw this in Matthew 6:28 through 30. This having little faith. Jesus speaks of worldly concerns and physical needs that cause distress and anxiety in people. And this right here is a similar setting with a very similar lesson. And the lesson is, you can trust God with what's happening around you. You can trust him to care for you in the midst of it. You can trust him to do what's best for you through it and work good on the other side of it. He has your best interest in mind. And we're going to see this loving rebuke from Jesus elsewhere in Matthew 14, when Jesus walks on water and he says, "Oh, you of little faith." Or in chapter 16, when the disciples are worried and they're like, "We don't have enough food." And he goes, "You of little faith." Or in chapter 17, where the disciples can't cast out a demon and Jesus goes, "You of little faith." It's because your faith. Each of these moments consistently speaks on some level of doubt that Jesus is addressing. And it always involves this interesting phrase, little faith. And so doubt is, in this context, God won't care for me. I can't trust him, so I need to preserve myself. It's the fight or flight. It's the self-preserving tendencies kicking in. But faith, on the other hand, is, hey, God will care for me. I do trust him, and I can tend to his kingdom first. And I love how Jesus addresses their faith in the storm, not after the storm has been calmed, not after the fact. Once things were settled, he handles it now, which is very similar to what he told the man before this. Hey, follow me now. The sixth observation is this. Back to Jesus rising and rebuking the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. I find it very interesting that the word here is he rebukes the winds and the sea. So the sixth observation is that he's handling disorder and chaos. And this might be a new concept for some of you, this concept of disorder and chaos and the ancient cosmology and the ancient view of the great deep and the abyss and all of that. But either way, Jesus is standing against the winds and the seas, the chaos of that is going to bring death. It's a kind of adversary to Jesus. It's an adversary to life. And so he rebukes the sea and the wind. That's the same language, the same action Jesus does for unclean spirits. He rebukes them. He rebukes unbelief. He rebukes doubt. He rebukes false teaching. He rebukes sickness. And we're going to see in the next story that this wild chaos on the sea that's bringing death, this actually reflects the wild chaos on the land that's coming from a legion of demons in the region of the Gadarenes. So the disorder and the chaos on both the land and the sea is representing the same invisible enemy, the same force that's threatening life that Jesus has come to deal with once and for all to set humanity free from sin and death. And Jesus is handling both the storm and the demons to show his authority, to show his power over the kingdom of darkness with just a word. He's crushing the head of the Leviathan, to use the language of the Old Testament. And here's the last observation, number 7. This is foreshadowing the cross. This story right here, there's a great calm. And the man marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this? Like, we thought we knew him now, but we know him way better now that even the winds and the seas obey him." So far, we've seen sickness obey his word. We've seen demons obey his word. We've seen people obey his word, crowds, whatever it ends. Now a storm. And so this story becomes a foreshadow of Jesus' ultimate victory on the cross when he triumphs over the chaotic powers of sin and death, when he crushes the power of the kingdom of darkness once and for all through his life, death, and resurrection. This right here, calming the storm, it's just a sample. It's just a glimpse into the real mission of Jesus, where he deals with the cosmic forces in the heavenly realms, when he handles our spiritual problem of sin and death. And in the same way, he's going to carry us across the seas of death and chaos into life by his word, the same way he carries the disciples here. And I'd like to suggest maybe a new perspective for you. Some would say God sent the storm. He oversees all of nature. He's in control of all things. Therefore, he is the ultimate first cause. But considering the rest of Matthew and the New Testament and the entire Bible, I would see it differently. I don't mean that God is not in control. God is not in charge, however you imagine the sovereignty of God. But I see this as a strategic and calculated attack of the enemy against Jesus, just like we saw in chapter 4. And we're going to continue seeing that theme come up all the way up to the cross. So I'm convinced this storm right here is actually the enemy trying to stop Jesus from doing whatever he thinks Jesus came to do. Just like in chapter 2, when he tries to kill Jesus through Herod by killing the babies, or in chapter 4, when Satan tries to tempt Jesus into sin. But this intentional move on the part of Jesus places the reverence, respect, and proper fear of the disciples on the right thing. So whatever the enemy meant through this for bad, just like Joseph says, God meant for good. And so I think this is, in the next story, we're going to see demons come up to Jesus. It's like the kingdom of darkness is hurling attack after attack. Whatever they think Jesus came to do, they're trying to stop it. But I want to focus on the disciples here. Jesus places the reverence. Look at, the men marveled. What man is this? What had their attention earlier? The sea. Now what has their attention? What has their reverence and awe? This man who is the Son of God. That's the one they're absolutely just blown away by. So Jesus uses the storm to correct their perspective, to take their reverence, respect, and fear and place it on the right thing. Not the storm, but on the God who has authority over it with a word. See, they were afraid of the storm and what it would do to us, and now they have a deeper understanding of who this man Jesus is. They have a clearer view of who he is, how powerful he is, and with that greater understanding comes greater trust. And I want us to think about the fact that this greater revelation, understanding, trust, it comes through the storm, not without the storm. So the question becomes, why does Jesus calm the storm? Why does this story happen at all? Why does he calm it the way that he does? And I would say there's several answers to that. Number one, to demonstrate the cost of discipleship and the need to daily grow in trust. Number two, to demonstrate how he's the greater Noah, providing a greater ark for his people and salvation. Number three, to demonstrate how he's the greater Jonah, bringing a greater message of salvation and repentance. Number four, to deal with their issue of doubt and their lack of faith and teach them to trust him. Number five, it's to open their eyes to who he really is so they have a greater understanding. And number six, it's to symbolize his power over the cosmic forces of evil and chaos that he comes to handle with a word. And finally, he's foreshadowing what he's about to do with the demons in the next story, but ultimately at his cross. He's crushing the head of Leviathan. He's bringing order to disorder. He's dealing with the chaos powers of sin and death and the spiritual problem that plagues humanity and God's creation. And I think the whole point of this is found back in chapter 6, verse 33, when Jesus says, "Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." He's teaching them that the Father will care for them if they just tend to the things of the Father. And so here's some homework for you. I want you guys to cross-reference some stories and passages with what happened right here in Matthew chapter 8, 23 through 27. The first passage is Jonah chapter 1, verse 4 through 16, where Jonah's asleep on the boat. Job chapter 38, verse 8 through 11, talks about God ruling the raging sea. There are many passages like that. Exodus 14, where God splits the waters for Israel to walk through. And Genesis chapter 7, all the way to chapter 8, verse 5. That's the story of Noah being rescued from the flood waters. And so the inner storm of the disciples and the actual storm on the sea are not the only storms Jesus intends to deal with in this chapter. In the next story, they're going to land at the other side in a Gentile region, and Jesus is going to cast out a legion, a multitude of demons, and he chooses to send those demons into pigs. So why pigs of all things? How is this connected to the calming of the storm? And what is Jesus revealing about himself and his kingdom when he performs these miracles back to back? I'll give you a hint. He's teaching us about faith again. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.